Boys and girls, ladies and gents, welcome to another episode of Clutch Conversations. It's your boy Mike. We're back at you live one more again on a Thursday night. It's going down tonight. We got the Carpet Python King in the building, Nick Mutton himself. Definitely looking forward to this, man. I've been looking forward to it all week. But before we get to the show, y'all know how we do. Make sure you show some love to my lovely wife, Takar. Don't stop there. Also, show the channel some love as well. Hit that like button. Hit that subscribe button and smash that notification bell so you can get notifications each and every time we drop a video on the channel. And we drop in videos 5-6 days a week with all the shows this coming to you. So definitely make sure you stay on top of all of that. And we're going to do something a little bit different than what we've been doing, testing some stuff out. So a lot of the promos and stuff that I do, I'm gonna do a lot of those at the end of the show, so definitely stick around for that so you won't miss no important announcements. And so we're gonna kick the sponsor video and then we'll be right back. Join Canova's Patreon today and get access to hundreds of hours of exclusive educational content designed to help you run a successful ball python business. Get insider information on the latest genetics, hot new combos, and market trends, learning directly from the world's leading ball python designer. With 5 benefits packed tiers, you may be asking yourself, which tier do I join, Bit Mike? Well, if you're on the fence, I'd recommend the student tier. When I first joined the Patreon almost 4 years ago, this is the tier that I started on, and it's only gotten better since. So don't delay. Join the Canova Patreon today.
Art comes in many forms. And on Miss Angels, it comes to life.
In life, success doesn't come to you. You go to it. In this game, forward thinking is the key to innovation and staying relevant. Plan your work and work your plan. Lose yourself in the art. Lose yourself with wetter morphs. Big shout out to the sponsors. Appreciate the support. Let's see who we got in the chat tonight. We got Double Clutch, Patreon member in the building. What's good, Vinny? Bone Daddy Serpents. We got the Sultan of Support himself, Big Bosa in the building. What's good? I see you with the orange and black, Mike G. What's good, Mike Duval? Appreciate you coming out, homie. We got the homie Gio. I know Gio been excited for this episode, man. So I definitely hope you enjoy it. We got the Sultaness of Support in the building. Shauna Connell, what's good? Big Jake, what's good? Appreciate you coming out. We got the homie Thomas in the building. Low Life Exotics. We got B Lock. What's good, homie? Appreciate you coming out. Breeder Underground, appreciate you coming out. Appreciate you. 319, 319 Reptiles, appreciate you coming out. See who else we got in the building tonight. And of course, we got my lovely wife, Takar. Hey, we're going to stop it right there. We're going to get the intro, and then we'll be right back with the guests.
Baby, won't you listen to me? I got that flavor. I know you're dying to feed. I ain't no dancer, just got some hip in my feet. Now throw your hands up. Ooh, you bring the lighter, I got the fuse. You make a fire, I'll add the fuel. Follow my lead.
Episode 165. Nick Mutton, what's good? How you doing, homie?
Good. Glad to be here.
Good, man. Glad to have you here. So I definitely appreciate you coming out.
Absolutely.
So are you at your facility now, like in the Reptile facility, or where you at?
It just keeps growing out of control. Well, not out of control, but over time, you just end up with more and more stuff, don't you? It's so like a lot of people, you start out with some cages in a room, and then you graduate and think you're big time because you have a snake room just for snakes. And eventually, you realize you need a snake building, and then your building isn't big enough, so you have to add on to the building to have a baby room just for the babies, and then a room for the adults in a snake building. And then that isn't enough room, so you need another baby room. And then so your office where your computer is now has 300 snakes in it. Then you also realize that your incubators aren't big enough, so you need a walk-in incubator room. So now the system is, I'm in my house. It's like there's an walk-in incubator room. I incubate the eggs in. It's about 30 feet from here. They hatch. They go into the room behind me. This room is for the current year's production. And then by the time the stuff that, these guys are a year old and the next year, the 2025 start hatching, they've got to go in here. And these guys go out to, I have another room that's used to be my baby room. Now it's for holdbacks, grow outs, yearlings, that kind of stuff. And then the adults go in a separate room. So I have a very inefficient 3 different rooms in 3 different buildings. Technically.
Yeah, that sounds about right. It's crazy like how quickly it scales up, like no pun intended. But yeah, I started out the same way, like had some in a room, and then we upgraded, then I had them in 2 rooms, and then like I got a dedicated facility space for stuff, and like now it seems like that's getting kind of packed between all the reptile stuff, all the supplies, and then stuff for like the network, and it just like, man.
I think that a lot of reptile breeders and reptile keepers on some level were all hoarders. Like you hatch something out and you're like, oh, I can't sell that. Look at that. You're so in love with what you just had. Like, so it doesn't even make sense. Like, okay, this year in 2024, it took me 15 years to get to that point, but I hatched out the world's first and only, they're Reptiles pythons, but they're hypomelanistic, genetic stripes, and stonewash, which is a form of piebald.
Okay.
And I finally hit the triple. It took 15 years because they take 4 years to mature. So it took a long road, and I hatched 6 of them, and I've got all 6 of them. Like, what am I going to do with 4.2 of these things? It doesn't make any sense. But I have not even thought about putting one up for sale. Like, oh nope, I'm just gonna. What am I gonna? And so I do this all the time. I tell myself the same lie every single year, and the lie goes something like this. Some people listening probably are familiar with this lie we tell ourselves, and it's like, well, I'll hold back. I want to hold back a pair, but I don't know which ones because they're going to change color. I don't know which ones are going to be the best, so I'll hold back 3.3 right now. And then as they grow, I will thin it down and whittle it down until I end up with the absolute best pair, and that's the pair I'll keep. And then I just never do that. And then I look up, and 3 years later, 4 years later, they're all 6 of them are adults. I don't know what to do with them. So you end up with these really inefficient collections. Like Reptiles pythons are my favorite species, but they'll lay 15 to 25 eggs. They're not laying, they're decent sized clutches. You don't need 2 clutches of anything. But like the animals that made the hypo stonewash stripes, well, I have 2 pairs of adults. I only hatched 2.2 of the parents, which are hypo stonewash het for stripe. And I kept them both. Like, well, if I bred them both in the same year, I would overpopulate the whole earth with them. So I end up with, I think I have 17 or 18 adult female Reptiles pythons. So I could single-handedly flood the market for the next 5 years if I just bred all the stuff I had in 1 year. So every year I breed only maybe 25% of my females. So in any given year, 3 out of every 4 females don't even see a male, because I don't want to make more than 50, 60 babies total from that species, because the market is small and you don't want to oversaturate.
Right. Yeah.
So why do I keep holding all this stuff back? They live forever. They lay a lot of eggs and they breed easy for me. So it's because
we definitely see a lot of that in terms of like market saturation in the ball python space. Especially when you're dealing like with certain morphs. Some morphs definitely are definitely more susceptible to it than others in terms of like how long they've been around, popularity, like all that good stuff. So we definitely see that. And it's interesting that you bring up like the market dynamics, like in the carpet python world. How are the market dynamics right now? Like I assume it's probably somewhat similar, but speak to that a little bit if you don't mind.
It is different in many ways in the ball pythons, primarily because ball pythons have become too easy to breed because they're entirely domesticated. So if you look back 30 years ago, you actually had to do something to breed ball pythons. You had to cycle them. Now this idea that one male at 6 months old will breed 9 females with somebody using an ultrasound and nobody cycles anything and everything just goes and all the females breed at 18 months, it's insane. The problem with the hobby has gotten too good and too efficient at cranking them out, and anybody that tries is mostly successful. You can do it. I bred ball pythons in accent. I did yesterday. My girlfriend's daughter has like a pair of pet ball pythons. They're just like, it doesn't even make sense. It's like a firefly het-pied male that I had laying around that she liked, and a blue-eyed Lucy female that is at minimum a pastel, an inchy, and a pinstripe, and who knows what else because it's white. They're just pets, but they live in this big cage, and and over time, and now I see they're locked up. Nobody's doing anything. They're just, oh look, you're locking up now. Like, I'm not even trying. I didn't even want the eggs. Like, they're just gonna do it. So that is carpet. You have to do a fair bit to induce breeding, but the market is so small by comparison. I mean, if you use morph market, which is maybe not the greatest way, but it's probably the only way you can get a real sense of things. If you look at morph market at any given day and use that as a barometer of how many of a thing are being produced, on a typical day like yesterday, there were 260 ads for carpet pythons. That's everything. There are 8 different species of carpet python, all the morphs, all the species, all the hybrids, everything was 260 snakes. Ball pythons, 37,000. 37,000 versus 260. And the 260, 20% of those is me.
20% of them are you?
Is me. And if you look at the descriptions and the ads of the other ones that aren't me, 60, 70% of them are descended from something that I produced. It's like it's that small of a little ecosystem. And so it would be, with the collection the size of mine, I could single-handedly drive the price into nothing. So I have to have self-control and not do that. So I hold back I made the first hypomelanistic genetic stripe bredls about in 2018. I've got a female and a male I've never even put together. I've never even bred them. I raised them up for 4 years, and then they've been ready to breed for 3 years, and I'm never going to breed them because they vary, and in my opinion, the quality of what they look like is not up to the standard I want. I held back 2.2. One pair looked great. One pair are not. They're darker. They're not as nice. So I will have raised these things up to adulthood for 7 years now and will never breed them. But if I bred everything, then it would just water everything down, and I could produce 500 carpet pythons a year myself, no problem, but that would be terrible.
Yeah, because I definitely wouldn't do anything on the supply side.
If you oversaturate, then there's no, what's the point? I'm just making more work for myself and selling stuff for half as much. Yeah. I don't want to, I try to have a fair amount of self-control. I breed a lot of snakes, but if you look at my collection, I think I have, put it this way, there are only 6 species of python that you can actually obtain that I do not currently have at this moment. 6, wow. That's it. That you can actually obtain. And then I do not have a Boland's python, I do not have a Moluccan python, and I don't have any of the 4 chondro python species. That's it. Every single other species of python. What?
Any of the 4 what?
Chondros, the green tree python.
Yeah.
I've had all of that stuff before, but currently every single other species and subspecies of python that exists that you can possibly obtain, there's a small number you can't get. But other than that, I have literally everything you could possibly have. So I try to breed a lot of that other stuff too, but it's all like a clutch of Angolan pythons, a clutch of Dunn's pythons. It's not trying to make big numbers of any one thing, trying to make modest numbers of some of these things.
Rough estimate, like how big is your collection?
I don't even know. It depends if you're counting holdbacks or babies. The total number of snakes at any one time, it varies from probably a low of 600 to a high of 1,000, depending on what time of year it is and whether it was a good season or not. We'll put it this way. In my adult room, I have a wall where all my male carpets live, and there's 58 males, just males of different things. But because I keep really good records and bloodlines, and dealing with Australian stuff, so much of it's Australian, your bloodlines and your genetic gene pool is very, very, very limited, because there's what the bloodlines you have are all you're ever going to have, since you can't get imports. So you have to try to manage that, and being able to track that over time and knowing what's related to what, and use that to your best ability. So sometimes I have whole pairs of snakes that I may never breed. They just sit there like that little hammer when you go out riding with public bus, there's that little hammer says break glass in case of emergency and pull the fire alarm. They're like that. I keep the pair I'm breeding, and there's this backup pair just in case something happens to one of those, to keep that bloodline going, because if I don't do it, no one will. There's a whole bloodline of Reptiles pythons right now that's so rare that if my adults croaked, they would just not exist anymore. There's literally like 3 adults.
In the world or just in the States?
In the States, I produced a few clutches of them, but 90% of the snakes you produce don't ever produce. They disappear into the ether. They change hands. Their ancestry gets lost. I would imagine, like the Harris bloodline Reptiles pythons, what I'm talking about, I would imagine there's probably 15 or 20 of them around. But if you buy this rare bloodline from me, and then that person sells it, and then that person sells it, and that person sells it, which happens all the time, by the time he gets the 4th person, they don't even know what bloodline it is. So it doesn't do any good to the gene pool, because nobody knows what it is. So it's not that they're all necessarily dead, but if you lost that information, that this is this rare genetic lineage,
right,
then it's of no use to anyone. So
yeah, that makes
for whatever reason, despite the fact that I made the first ones, I think I hatched the first ones from that line in 2012. So I hatched the first clutch of those 13 years ago. To this day, not a single person has ever hatched a clutch of them, other than me. I don't know why. I sold people these animals, but nobody kept it going at all.
Have you kept up with any of those people?
No, but I could. One thing I pride myself on doing that a lot of people don't do is I keep probably the best records of anybody in this hobby. Not just like anybody goes to my website, you'll see my lineage records page, and you'll see like a family tree with photographs for all these clutches going back to the dawn of time. Some of these trees go back 30 years, 40 years, almost 40 years to the mid 80s, with pictures all the way back. And that's the best way to keep track of long-term lineage records, in my estimation. But in addition to that, I take a photograph of every single snake I produce. It has a coded serial number for every snake that tells me everything I need to know, that tells me where its lineage records are. And then when I sell a snake, I move it to a different folder for snakes from that clutch I sold, and then I add the person's name who I sold it to, and then I keep their information in another spreadsheet. So I could literally go back and tell you where every single one of those Harris line Reptiles went, and I have that person's name, email, and phone number from when I shipped it to them. Still, which sometimes a couple of times I've had to go back and find some rare thing that I sold, and then the one I had, you get some bad luck, something dies, whatever, and then and then try to track down my own stuff years later.
Try to buy it back.
Yeah, and it doesn't go well for me when that happens, because when you do that, like, you end up paying a lot. Like somebody's had something for 5, 6, 7 years, and it's raised it all up. They're not really interested in selling it. It's like you sometimes have to pay a lot for a snake you hatched. More than you sold it for. But sometimes, like, keeping these bloodlines around for posterity is important to me. So.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. So in the carpet python community, what are some of the hot button topics that kind of gets everybody going in the community?
It used to be, there was a big one for a long time, but it's really like people, I don't know, we all just got tired of arguing and got old or something. But, and I was big into arguing with people about it. One thing you don't have in any real measurable way with ball python side of things is the issue of hybrids and the detrimental effects that causes. I mean, you always got somebody fucking around breeding Angolan pythons to ball pythons, but not in a significant enough way that it causes actual problems. But with like carpet pythons, the gene pool is an absolute abomination. And it's mostly ball python people's fault in the following way. You have all these different species and subspecies of carpet python, and they all look really different from each other. That's fine. That's cool. But what ended up happening is when the ball python morph thing started going crazy in the late 90s, very early 2000s, when I think it was 99 or 2000 when Pete Hall proved out the piebald, and that's when it really exploded.
Mm-hmm.
Carpet python people didn't have any morphs, but they had different species that looked really different. So they started treating these different species like they were morphs. It's like a jungle carpet is not a yellow morph of carpet. It's a different freaking snake. And they just started mixing and matching, trying to play mad scientists. They wanted to play like morphs like ball python people, but they didn't have any morphs. And then they got a few morphs. The jaguar carpet came over from Europe, which is just a spider carpet. Same thing.
Yeah.
Same heterozygous state, same wobbly trait, same dead white super form. For those lingering few ball python people that don't accept that there's a super spider after being lied to for 20 years about it. But there is, and it's dead, and it doesn't have a lung, and it's a white snake with a thumbprint smudge in its head, and the lung doesn't develop. It looks exactly like the super jaguar, unsurprisingly, because it's exactly the same thing.
Okay.
That's a weird, interesting topic. I think a lot of people don't realize is that the same mutations occur over and over and over again. Identical mutation occurs in totally unrelated species, totally separately, and it happens all the time. The zebra morph in jungle carpets is the exact same mutation as the batik morph in blood pythons. Exactly the same mutation. Same heterozygous state, same homozygous state, same tail tip defects, everything. The jaguar / spider, that occurs in like, the spider ball, the jaguar carpet, the scoria boa. You ever seen the super scoria? Yeah, I wonder why. It's because it's the same thing. They're all the same thing. They're lethal white mutations that are where you have the heterozygous state is a reduced pattern, pale eyes, clear ventral scales, and a wobble. And the super form is a dead white snake with no lung. In the case of boas, if they die and they die before they die prematurely, you really can't tell what you're looking at.
Mm-hmm.
But scoria has been around for well over 2 decades, and wouldn't you know it, there's no super scoria. It's because it's that premature looking stillborn. Because it's a dead white snake. And there are that mutations occurred multiple times. The black-eyed Lucy in ball python, that occurs in a bunch of things. That is identical to the Lucy form in boa constrictors, and also in Amazon tree boas, in which you have a black, where the heterozygous state is like a low rent hypo looking thing, and the homozygous state is a black-eyed white snake with occasional random yellow blotch or black freckles. Exact same form in totally different species. And the boas and the pythons split about 70 million years ago. Like they're deeply diverged lineages, but the same mutations, identical defects pop up. So,
do you know why that is?
Just random happenstance. The genomes are not. All of life on Earth is way more closely related than people think. We tend to obsess about the differences, and it's like, okay, well, just to put it in terms everybody knows, look at people, look at me, look at you. We don't look the same. There isn't 2 shits difference between us genetically, like at all. Nothing. It is ridiculous. Any 2 people on Earth are more closely related to each other than any random 2 chimpanzees in the same troop of chimpanzees. Like we have incredibly low diversity. All this, all these things that we tend to call race or, phenotype in humans are the result of literally like 12 genes. That's it. 12 genes that have only existed for 10 to 12,000 years. Prior to that, white people didn't exist 12,000 years ago. We can use a molecular clock and trace those mutations that cause paler skin color in Homo sapiens, and they go right to the end of the last ice age, and after that. Same with blue eyes. Same with a lot of stuff. It's all recent. But snake people, ball python people should really understand this. Look at how different something can look with the presence of a single gene. Look at something very mundane in the ball python community. Everybody knows, the cinnamon.
Mm-hmm.
One copy makes this whole, changes the color, changes the pattern. 2 copies of that same gene, it literally changes to a patternless black snake and changes the skull structure of the snout, even changes from one gene. If you were to look at if a geneticist looked at a cinnamon ball python and a wild type ball python, it would be the same. They would not be able to detect the difference. It would be identical because it's just one allele, but it completely changed its bone structure, its color, its pattern, everything. So there's a big discordance between genotype and phenotype. Big changes on the outside are not necessarily reflective of deeper evolutionary change. That's why people look really different, but they're all almost exactly the same. at a molecular level. There isn't two shits difference between any two humans. But you'll see, something like a chimpanzee that we all think looks the same have much greater diversity in their genomes. But most of those changes through genetic drift don't actually change the phenotype. But it doesn't take much to change the phenotype. So,
yeah, gotcha. So back up a little bit, and because you've got a ton of experience in the reptile space. Like I know you've been keeping for a while, and then you've been doing it on like more of the business and breeder side. So talk about some of your experience that kind of led to where you are now, and how you kind of accumulated so much knowledge about reptiles and genetics.
I've been a nerd for a very long time. Very long time. I've always been interested in reptiles from elementary school onward, and it's just always been something I was fascinated by. And I was lucky to have parents who were relatively indulgent, bringing home lizards and snakes I'd catch on recess in elementary school and this kind of stuff. And then you have that kind of epiphany moment when you move out and you move away from home, and you're like, fuck, I can have any crazy pet I want now. So I got an iguana, and one iguana became 5 iguanas, and then 5 iguanas became increasingly rare species of iguanas. And then I decided to get a snake. And I decided, it'd be the perfect first snake, a mainland reticulated python. Terrible idea, just terrible. The most inappropriate thing for your first snake. And then keeping snakes eventually turns into, what if I could breed these things? And then it's like, and it just kind of, it gradually sort of built up and everything. And then eventually I didn't have time to go to work anymore. So I could have quit my job probably 5 or 6 years before I did, but there's always that jumping off point when you're like, boy, like quitting your day job and just going in this full time was a bit, that was a bit of a leap, but best decision I ever made. So it's made all the difference. I'm a pretty happy guy. When my first son was born, like I quit my day job and just went full time. So I've been able to be the stay-at-home parent with my 2 boys. I never missed a single school event. Never missed any of that stuff. And I could make a living working from home. So it's been a pretty good gig.
Yeah, that is pretty dope. Like I imagine when you first getting ready to make that decision and you kind of like thinking about it, it can definitely be scary a little bit, just because you go from kind of a consistent, almost guaranteed source of income is if you do your job and your company stays in business, to kind of putting it on the backs of like reptiles that can be temperamental with breeding and stuff like that. And also, go ahead.
I waited a while. I was I could have done it earlier, but I tried to time it. I planned it all out. I'm like, okay, I bought animals and raised them up because I wanted to have a better portfolio of things, more diverse. You don't want all your eggs in one basket.
Right.
Well, if you had all of your money entirely in ball pythons, it's not in a good state right now. Let's be honest. It's kind of been rough. It's been rough these last couple of years. You're entirely vulnerable to the whims of that one market sector. And so I had things, I wanted to have different in different market sectors and at different price points, so that when this went down, there would still be other things that might be in better shape. And if you went to your financial advisor, they're never going to tell you to put every penny you have on one stock. You're going to spread the risk out at least a little bit.
Portfolio.
Yeah, exactly. So I did all that in advance and had that stuff pretty much ready to go before I took that leap. And I planned it all out. I timed it up so perfectly that my last day working for someone else was on December 31st. Because my dumbass thought, oh, sweet, I won't even have to worry about taxes. Then I realized that there's a lag in the pay period. I got one paycheck like 7 days into the new year. So I had to do that again. I thought I was that on. But I'll never forget, like, my last day job, I worked at a body shop doing fiberglass fabricating and all this kind of stuff, which I continue to do for fun now on carbon fiber car parts and stuff I make for fun for myself, but with those skills. But in that industry, everybody there is like wants to get out of that industry and wants to start their own shop, but they only want to work on cool cars and this kind of stuff. And that's their persistent daydream. And, I had a different daydream. I want to breed these snakes, and they all thought I was weird. But I turned in my 2 weeks notice, like middle of December that last year, almost 20 years ago now. And they're like, where are you going? They just knew I was going to work. I'm not going anywhere. I was serious this whole time. For 2 years, I'm telling you I'm going to do this. I'm ready to do this now. I'm like, it's time. I've laid the groundwork. I've saved up a bit of an oh shit fund, and just in case it goes bad at first. Like I've done everything I can. It's time to go for it. I just think that a lot of people, and this gets more philosophical and less herpetological, I suppose, but a lot of people probably need to hear this. It's like everybody listening to this podcast has hopes and dreams and aspirations, things they want to do with their life. And most people never even try. They listen to all the people around them that tell them, oh, that'll never work. You can't do that. They piss down their back and tell them it's raining. And they listen to that and they never go for it. It's like, I didn't want to be that guy. I want to at least give it a shot, right? You know, if you go for it and you fail, then at least you try. I didn't want to like never try. I think most people in the hobby would love to breed snakes for a living or work with animals for a living.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of people that tell you can do something, like when it's something you really want to do and you're capable of doing it, like I feel like they project like their own like baggage on you because they can't do it. So they're like, you can't do that.
That's it.
You can't listen to them.
It comes down to this simple bit of psychology. They didn't try to pursue their dreams at all, and they deem it's too late. So if you don't listen to that and you try to pursue your dreams and you're successful, then they have to look themselves in the mirror and accept the fact that they didn't even try. So it's easier to sabotage you than admit to themselves that they didn't even go for it. If you go for it and you fail, at least you went for it. And it worked out. It worked out. I mean, I don't think I'm lucky. I just thought about it and thought it through really. And I did not jump in with both feet, man. I was very tepid. I built everything up. It was very incremental. And I had a plan and it was, but there is that jumping off point. But best decision I've ever made. No question.
So early on, were there like any kind of challenges that made you second guess stuff or kind of made you a little bit nervous?
There was one thing that happened fairly early on that was really, and that was the Great Recession of 2008 when the economy went in the toilet. And that was also when I was building my snake building. So I had like all of a sudden revenue went in the toilet initially, and I was putting up a building. Like, so you have like you're hemorrhaging money on that, and the economy is not, people are not in a buying mood so much. And I don't know if you were in the hobby back in those days, but it's been a minute now, but the mood in the hobby was pretty doom and gloom. There's mostly a bunch of people on the internet pissing and moaning and whining about, nobody's buying anything. But they're not doing anything about it. They're just like complaining, and they're not doing anything to try to better the situation. And I thought, man, there were people who got rich in the Great Depression. Not very many, admittedly, but not everybody suffered. And so while everybody else was complaining about the bad market conditions, man, I was like trying to figure out how to be better at selling snakes. While people were listening to podcasts or listening to music and grumbling, I'm listening to, much stuff like, do you know how many like seminars and sales courses you can take and listen to like on an audiobook sort of thing? There's a tons of that stuff. It teaches you the psychology and the technique, the craft, the art of selling stuff, because you can be very good at, and we all know people in this hobby, they're very good with the animals, but they're terrible at selling the snakes, because those are two totally different things. You have to know how to sell stuff. And so I just like, well, if there's fewer dollars going around because the economy's in the toilet, I'm going to make myself better at getting a share of what the limited resources that there is to get. And I had my best year ever in the worst economy since the Great Depression. I did great in 2008, 2009, because I didn't snivel and whine about it sucking. I just tried to do, what can I do to make myself better at my job so that I can get a better share of the limited money that's going around. And it worked.
So what were some of those techniques that you use, that you learned from some of the books and podcasts, audiobooks, all that good stuff?
Well, now you want me to give away all the secrets there. So,
not all of them, just like one or two. Just one or two, like the least useful.
Okay, a few sales tips for me. First thing, don't do all your business only over the internet. And by that, I mean, if someone expresses interest in a snake or whatever, give them your phone number, tell them to call you, and you'll discuss the details. If they call you, they want to buy the snake and they're serious. If they don't, they probably were never going to buy it. And it's a very effective filter for photo collectors and whatnot. If they won't talk to you. The reality is that we have all deal with tire kickers and time wasters on a regular basis, where everybody listens. Oh yeah, everybody knows.
Yep.
I figured out the reason why by watching my girlfriend, and I figured out why this phenomenon happens. And when you buy a new thing, you get a little bit of an endorphin rush, a little bit of serotonin. Ooh, I got a new thing. And those little happy brain chemicals happen because you got a new thing. It doesn't last very long, but that happens. It turns out that if you almost buy a thing, you also get a tiny little taste, but no cost. I learned this watching my girlfriend endlessly load up her Amazon shopping cart on her phone with all these things and then never buy any of the things. Or walk around Walmart and putting stuff in a cart and then putting it back. Because you actually get the tiniest little taste of that, those endorphins, when you convince yourself you're going to get a thing, but then you just don't get it at the last minute. That's why these people are wasting your time. And if you can hide behind the anonymity of your monitor or your phone, and you never talk to somebody, to waste somebody's time in person, oh, well, that's personal. You wouldn't want to do that. But if you can hide behind a screen, you don't see them, you never hear their voice, there's no person-to-person communication, they'll waste your time all day. They will. It's like, but that's the phenomenon. Oh, and it's like somebody with no money, it's like you can contact this person, ask them a bunch of stupid questions that are clearly listed in the ad, ask them questions that don't matter, ask them for pictures when you don't need them, and all this stuff. The longer you can do that, the longer you can stretch out the illusion that you might get the thing, and you keep those happy chemicals going for a little bit. Eventually, you have to ghost them because you don't have any money. That's why this is happening. That's why this is happening. And if you tell people, here's my number, great, we can work something out, give me a call, we'll sort it all out. If they call, they're serious. They'll almost 95% of people who call you will buy that snake because they're serious. And the people that won't, probably most of them never work. So I just use that to filter people out. And the other bit of advice is just this. If someone actually calls you, they want to buy that snake. They already do. They wouldn't have gotten to that point. It's like the easiest thing you do is just make that okay. They want to feel good about what they're doing, about their purchase, and just make them feel good about it. Answer their questions. Make them, if you're genuine and you are passionate about what you are doing for real, that will come across in a phone call, and then they'll get excited about it, and they'll like, fuck, that sounds awesome. If you call me and you want to talk about carpet pythons, you're quickly going to fuck, you're going to, goddamn, this dude's really into carpet pythons. Because if you're genuinely passionate about a thing, it's like almost contagious. Like, that sounds awesome. I want some of that. It's like, and the same is also true if you're not genuine. If you're just going through the motions, flipping animals, and you're just doing it to try to make a buck, that also comes across too, doesn't it? I mean, who do you want to buy a snake from? Someone who's literally eats and breathes this stuff every day, who's that passionate about it? Or somebody's just going through the motions to try to make a buck? It's like that comes across just as well. So pursue the projects, the species, the things you are genuinely passionate about yourself. Don't chase what you think other people want. Do what, to thine own self be true. Do what you want to do and what you are genuinely interested in, whatever that is. And it will come, when you talk to people, it'll come across that, holy shit, this dude's really into this. And your excitement, they catch a little bit of your excitement, and it helps you sell stuff. But you have to be genuine and really, really into the thing that you're doing. But I think that touches on another problem in the hobby, is you have too many people that are just doing things and breeding things that they think other people want to buy instead of breeding the things that they really personally enjoy. And I think if you're doing that, you're always losing. It's like, and if you do the former and you pursue what you really like, it doesn't matter what it is, what you really like, you will always be happy because you're doing what you love.
Yeah, I said it all the time. You got to work with what you love.
Exactly.
What makes you happy. That's what keeps you going. That's what keeps you interested. Like when you're looking at your animals, you're working with your animals, like all that good stuff. You got to work with what you love.
Oh, yeah.
Forget what the next person likes and all that good stuff.
You'll do so much better, and you'll be so much happier. I can't imagine how unhappy it must be to always be chasing, just getting something you think is going to be the next hot thing that you don't really care, but you're just doing it for that reason. If you're not really into it, it's like you'll come across as disingenuous. You'll come across as you're just doing it for that reason. Just be genuine. There's so much stuff, whether it's morphs or species, it doesn't matter what it is. There's so much depth and breadth in the hobby. There's something out there to be passionate about for pretty much anybody. Think of all the amazing animals that are out there. It's like, why would you ever choose to work with something you weren't personally just absolutely in love with? There's so many awesome things. There's too many awesome things. I have all the things I have, and there's still awesome things I don't even have space for. Why would I ever want to take the time to work with things I didn't want to work with? I was just to go through the motions.
100%. 100%. It's a lot of work involved too. And then also on top of that, when you chasing like that next hot thing, by the time you make it, a lot of times it's not even the hot thing anymore. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's the hot thing of yesterday. So why not work with what you're passionate about?
The thing with and that's a problem people have that's mostly morph related, in that morphs are not better than anything. They are just different than other things. They're not, and so they're inherently sort of transient and temporary. this is what's hot now because it's new and rare. But as time goes on, it's less new and less rare until eventually it's common. And then it's like, nobody cares. Now we're after this other thing. If you're always chasing a trend, it's like, what's the old like bumper sticker from the 70s? It's like, unless you're the lead dog, the view never changes. Yeah, it's because you're looking at the dog in front of you's asshole the whole time. You're just constantly chasing a trend. You're just looking at the next guy's ass. That's all you're doing. You're never going to get anywhere chasing after what so-and-so did. You just blaze your own trail, figure what you are passionate about, come with your own ideas, your own plan, and do your own thing. And when you get to that end of that road, you'll be so much more into it. It's so much more rewarding, like than chasing after what somebody just already did. It's like you never really get anywhere. You got to blaze your own trail, develop your own identity.
100%, 100%. So you talked a little bit earlier, like when we first started, about like how quickly things kind of like grew in terms of like collection size and need more space and all that good stuff. So talk about kind of like, and put like a time frame on it, and talk about like how your collection grew over time to where it's at right now, and maybe speak to some of the challenges of like expanding and all that.
Well, now we're talking about a period of time so far in the past, I have a hard time remembering. We're talking like the 90s. So,
wow.
Yeah, I've been doing this for 30 years. So we're talking, I'm old. I'm super old. I was born during the Nixon administration. That's how old I am. So, you're talking about a long, long time ago. When did I hit 100 snakes? I don't know. Probably in the early 2000s. I probably had a couple hundred adult snakes for well over 20 years now. My collection's about the same size as it's been for the last maybe 10 years. I don't want it can't get any bigger. I don't have enough space for all the stuff I already have. I'm constantly, what am I going to do with this? Holdbacks get big. I've got too many snakes. I'm calling up buddies of sending them adult snakes on breeding loan. Just take them. Like after this season, I got to give away a pair of adult African rock pythons. I don't even, it's like, there's no space. These have to go. Like I've bred them a couple times now. I got Sri Lankan pythons I need to put in those cages, or Papuan pythons, or whatever. You only have so many appropriately sized cages, especially on the larger end, that it's like, to breed all the things I want to breed before I die, I need to move some stuff out. So I really have to restrict a lot of things.
How is it working with the African rocks?
I love them. I don't want to part with them. They're a snake that commands respect, but they're not as bad or as big as people think. Like, neither one of mine has ever struck at me, but I will never trust them either. They're very vocal and they hiss. Like, most pythons don't really hiss. They hiss, and it's intimidating. They'll breed way smaller than people think. My pair is like 10 or 11 years old, and the female lives in a 4-foot cage, no problem. They're not that big. Though they can get very large. Turns out if you don't feed them gazelles, they don't really get that big. It's like I feed her like my female, like, a chicken or a duck or a 2-pound rabbit every so often. And they don't need to be that big. The male, I just feed large rats to. But I like them. I don't know. There's something about them. It's kind of that forbidden fruit. They're like, ooh, these are supposed to be nasty. Like, you can kind of handle them like that. I actually like them, but I've gotten a weird I have an ongoing little competition with my best friend, Ryan Young, who's probably one of the best python breeders who's ever bred pythons. And Ryan's a nerd like me, and kind of weird in the sense that he kept like a spreadsheet over years before I even knew he was doing this, of everybody who'd bred anything, basically. Any breeder who'd ever bred like a large number of python species. And basically created a database of who had bred the most python species in the history of the hobby. And then with a goal of like being the guy who produced more species of python than anybody who ever lived. And eventually he told me about this goal and everything. And I was looking at basically the stats, the all-time standings of who the most prolific python breeders who ever lived were in terms of number of species they produced. And he is the number one who's produced more than anybody, but I'm tied for 3rd place on that list. So I'm like, all right, it's game on now. So
who are you tied with?
I am tied with, who was it? VPI is ahead of me. I need to breed 4 more species to pass them. Who am I tied with? Now I'm drawing a blank now. He's got me on the spot. I'm one below VPI.
Okay.
But I should move into solo third place by the end of this year. I just got to breed one more species that I haven't bred before.
Gotcha.
I have several. I have all 3 species of short-tailed python locking up right now, and I've never hatched any of them. So I could conceivably pass VPI this year. I have everything I need to do that. Will they all breed? Some of these things are difficult to breed, though. But I have a goal. I picked up every species of retic, including the one that's not even been formally classified by science yet.
There's like what?
That's the other thing. Like
4 including that one, right?
What?
Is there what 4 including that one?
Yeah, there's a 4th one that people don't know about. But
I heard you talking about
a little contest includes undescribed species that we know about that most people don't know about because we're nerds. So there's a 4th retic species that was kind of accidentally discovered. The Philippine retics are a distinct species that have not been named, but they're off the charts different at a molecular level. But the paper that showed that wasn't really looking to find a new species. They were looking into other things. They kind of an accidental finding, like, holy crap, these things are way different. They're more different from the other retics than the other retics are from each other. So they're a different thing. So that I'm counting that. There's a few things like that. Species that are clearly different species that I have looked at their DNA basically and know that these are different species, whether or not they've been formally classified or not. In our own little unofficial contest, we're counting all that stuff too. So
gotcha.
I mean,
are you familiar with Stephen Tillis?
Yeah, I don't know him very well. I have met him in person once or twice. I haven't actually he's like a real nice guy, but it's like weird. Like, I feel like I should know him better than I do because we run in the same circles, but I know him just a little, but I feel like I should know him more, but he seems like a really nice dude.
Yeah. He lives near me. We had him on one of our other shows one time before. And it was a real like insightful, interesting discussion. And I know he keeps a bunch of python species. Like he says it's like at least half of the world's species of pythons. He keeps them, and he's near me. And I've been meaning to get over there and see a lot of what he's got, but life just been so busy. But I definitely want to get over there and check it out.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting species that a lot of people don't have that much familiarity with. But I like all the weird stuff. The less common stuff, that's what I really like. But that stuff is, you could never make a living supporting yourself breeding just that oddball stuff because it's mostly hard to breed. Like, you couldn't pay all your bills every year breeding white-lip pythons because they don't bless you with eggs like regularly. They're not like, they don't breed like clockwork at all. They're difficult to breed. You know, you can definitely breed them if you persist, but it's not like you're going to crank out 200 white-lip pythons this year. Never going to happen. You know, Apodora, they're like, it's like you can, all these things will breed, but they're not going to breed year in, year out. You know, it's like it's very hit or miss, and it's, you know, you can't rely on it. So
in terms of the species you have bred, are those like 2 of the toughest to breed, or are there some tougher than that?
I've never bred Apodora. I loaned my adults to Ryan Young, actually, because I never put them. I ended up with a pair of adults, big adults. I never put them.
You like that?
Oh yeah, and I just picked him up at the airport, and Ryan was with me. I said, "Here, take him to your house." He already had a couple others. Now you have a group. But he's bred them, and now he's like making me take him back. You take those Apodora back, you take those snakes back. So I had to find somebody to give these rock pythons to, so I can use those cages for the Apodora. And having I have 4 species of retic, and they're all, the problem with retics, you can't really warehouse them and not feed them. They'll rub their faces half off. They're moving around. You got to feed them so I'm constantly feeding them like little meals all the time. I don't really want them to grow much because I got to open up some bigger cage space, but I can't not feed them at all. But it took me an absolute mountain of money and, I don't know, 6 or 7 years to find all 4 species of retics that were pure, because the retic market, they're all hybrids. The hardest thing in the world to find is a pure reticulatus that isn't tainted with something else, because they all decided to breed dwarf retics into everything, but turns out, oops, dwarf retics aren't retics. They're a different snake. So now all of your morph retics are all hybrids. And to find one that's not a hybrid is actually quite a challenge.
So dwarf retics aren't true retics?
Well, they're a subspecies of retic, but they're only a subspecies of retic because they didn't want to spend the money on DNA testing. So they named those 2 things as subspecies because the burden, the threshold. They wouldn't catch as much crap in peer review by naming a subspecies if you didn't do DNA work. So you slap a provisional name. Oh, we'll name it as a subspecies. Then if anybody else later does a proper DNA analysis, they'll have to use your name. It's a way to kind of pinch the naming rights to a new species that you know good and well is a new species. It's why the progschai, the dwarf worms, are only a subspecies when they are clearly a different species. Clearly a different species. But they didn't have the financing to do DNA testing, so they just slapped subspecies status on it so that, you know, anybody that ever does the actual work later will have to use their name, and they didn't have to spend the money.
So talk a little bit about let's deep dive into the nerdy side of it in terms of like how they're classifying like all these different species and what makes something the same, what makes something different, and what they're looking at and all that good stuff.
Okay, the short answer is it's all bullshit. It's all made up. That's the truth. Like, I think people think that there's, and this is important for people to know if you're in the reptile hobby and you look at species, subspecies, whatever, and you consider that, is that there is no universal standard for what a species even is or how it's defined. It is entirely up to whoever's writing the paper in their opinion. And there's never, ever, ever, ever any such thing as official taxonomy. It doesn't fucking exist. You occasionally get a longstanding sort of consensus opinion that nobody challenges, but it's never official. All the paper, somebody writes a paper and they put out and say, it's basically saying like, in our opinion, based on this evidence, we feel this is a new species and this is what it should be called. And anybody else who reads that paper can say, yeah, I agree, or no, that's nonsense. There's never an official anything. There's nothing. It's all made up. There is like 20-something different species concepts in use currently. Nobody uses the biological species concept much anymore, but there's the phylogenetic species concept is really popular, but that's different than the evolutionary species concept. There isn't even a way to define a species with any consistency. So you end up with absolute absurdities in the world of taxonomy. Okay, like it was actually a doctoral thesis in 2003 on carpet pythons. They did one of the most, at the time, they'd done the most comprehensive phylogenetic analysis of the carpet pythons done up to that time. And they found that they set this absurd sort of bar for sequence divergence at 5%. Anything that's more than 5% different is a different species, and anything that's less than 5% is the same species. I'm like, 5%? Are you kidding me? At 5%, that would be like saying that chimpanzees, bonobos, gorillas, and orangutans and Homo sapiens are all Homo sapiens, because we're all within that. We're within that. That's absurd. At 5%, you would have exactly one species of elephant. You would have one species of cat. Your house cat would be a tiger. It would be, oh, we can't tell them apart. They're within 5%. It's insane. Meanwhile, on the other extreme, you have people there are literally species of frogs and species of birds that are designated as separate species based solely on the noises that they make. Well, this frog lives in this valley over here, and it makes a different mating call. It's a different species. That's it. It makes a different noise, or a different bird that sings a different song is a different species. That's this ridiculously non-existent threshold, but a snake's got to be 5%. Like, then when you calibrate that with the rate of evolutionary change is very different depending on metabolic rate and reproductive output. You have to factor in, it's not just, even if the average mutation rate, genetic drift or just random accumulation of mutations that cause things to become separate over time, even if that was the same for a mouse and for a python, the mouse is going to evolve thousands of times faster, because what it is all of that mutation rate, picture like a fraction, mutation rate with a line under it, and then reproductive output over time. That's the calculation. It's like every time you reproduce, there is an opportunity for a fuck up to happen and a mutation to occur. So the more times you reproduce, the more, and every offspring you produce in your life is an opportunity for a mutation to occur. So mutation rate in humans, very low. We have one offspring every handful of years at most, and over the course of your life, you're only going to produce, even in, 100 years ago, 6, 8 babies, maybe. That's it. That's all you're ever going to produce in your entire life. And some people far less. Not many opportunities for mutations to occur. Then you contrast that with like a python. It's like, well, it lays its first clutch at 12 eggs at 5 years old. It lays 3 clutches before it dies. It has maybe, 30 or 40 babies in its whole life. Maybe most of those get eaten immediately. Very few chances for a beneficial mutation to take hold. Then look at a mouse. It has 12 babies when it is 8 weeks old, and then for the next year and a half, it cranks out hundreds of offspring, each one an opportunity for mutation to occur. So the evolutionary rate in mice is going to be exponentially higher than in something. Now think of like fruit flies and in insects that reproduce like, or frogs that will lay 10,000 eggs. It's exponentially faster. So saying that like the 5% ridiculous threshold in that particular paper on pythons is way more significant than it would be in other things. That like, because their reproductive rate over time is so low, and their reproductive rate for their lifetime is so low compared to other things that have a lower trophic level. So it's insane. So there needs to be that. And the whole basic thing with taxonomy is you are using a set of rules that were concocted over 200 years ago before we knew what DNA was. There is still, and they refuse to amend. You have to comply with what's the ICZN code, which is the International Convention for Zoological Nomenclature. That's the governing body, if you will, that is the most antiquated, ridiculous organization, if ever there was one, that has still never set. They're still using the same basic system of binomial nomenclature and rules set up by Linnaeus in like the 1780s with no changes. And all that system says is it's so arcane. It says you have to write up a piece of paper that says how you can determine your new species from the other species it's seemingly related to. And then you have to print up a certain number of copies of that and then distribute them within a certain mile radius of your house. Because this is before mass media and you could email, or it's like, yes, print up 100 copies and distribute it with 100 miles. That was it. And we're still stupid rules. It's like, how much weight do you give DNA? Who knows? They've never said. Like, it's like, it's just however much you think it should be. So I think that if, and you get crappy people like arguing like, oh, this scrub python is only 2% different from this other scrub python. It's like, yeah. And humans and chimps are less than 1% different from each other. What's your point? Like, it's like, or they'll say things like, well, these hybridize in the wild, so they can't be different species. It's like, yeah, so do humans. If you look at the human genome, you and I are both packed full of archaic hominid DNA. Like we all have, because of my ethnic and geographical makeup, I probably have 3 different species of archaic hominids DNA in me from hybridization events in the past. I will have Denisovan DNA, I will have Neanderthal DNA, and I will have a tiny, tiny, tiny fragment of archaic hominid DNA from West Africa that we don't know have a fossil for that whatever species. You can see the DNA signature comes up as what's called a ghost lineage. You can tell people bred with somebody that wasn't quite Homo sapiens, and it shows up in your DNA, but we don't have a fossil that correlates because tropical Africa is shit for fossil preservation. So, you have at least a couple other non-Homo sapiens in you. Everybody listening does. Nobody on Earth is a pure Homo sapiens. We're all hybrids. So to argue that hybridization somehow invalidates the species when the person saying that themselves is a hybrid, and last I checked, nobody's trying to invalidate Homo sapiens, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. We need a universal standard. And so that's my soapbox on why taxonomy is a bunch of nonsense. And I actually engage in this stuff a bit too. So it's like, very frustrating. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting, man. I want to take a quick commercial break, and then I want to come back, talk about that a little bit more, and then also talk about your work with the book. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Known for his innovative approach to genetic shed testing and top quality ball pythons, Grey Rider Reptiles also excels in exceptional customer service and responsiveness. With a quick turnaround time, Charlie ensures you get the service you want and need. Visit shedtesting.com to explore his offerings and experience the best in the business. Don't miss out. Head to shedtesting.com today and unlock the power of your breeding projects.
Peace and love, family. We invite you into the heart of our serenity, Ancestral Royal Pythons. At Ancestral Royal Pythons, we're not just breeders, we're nurturers of love and growth. Each of our high-end ball pythons is a tribute to the grandeur of the natural world and our dedication to quality. Reach out today and bring one of our creations into your home. This is Ancestral Royal Pythons. Your journey begins here.
Here's to the exciting world of ebony and ivory reptiles. From unforgettable parties and events to keeping and hatching some of the dopest reptiles in the reptile hobby, we're all about education, quality, integrity, and respect. Hit us up and see how we can help make your next project a reality. Experience ebony and ivory reptiles, where fascination meets fun.
Ebony and ivory reptiles.
Big shout out to the sponsors. Yeah, that's interesting, man. I didn't realize how much leeway they had with coming up with different species and stuff like that. I never knew that.
Yeah, it's all just made up. And the standard changes over time, and then you have people. It's it's just crazy. There's also a bit of a kind of an old boys club sort of mentality to it, in the sense that whatever the sort of species group is that you're interested in, there's usually a small little group of dudes that write all the papers on that thing, and their opinion seems to be what dominates, even if their opinion is dumb. I'll give you a really super glaringly obvious example. Monitors. Monitor taxonomy is absolutely fucking absurd. Every single monitor lizard is in the same genus. You have monitor lizards that are separated in time by 30, 40 million years of separate evolution. Same genus. All the extinct monitors, same genus. You have dwarf store-eye monitors that are literally the size, not much bigger than, they look like a chubby anole. They're that big. And then in Indonesia, you have a Komodo dragon that's like a 10-foot, 250-pound venomous lizard, same genus. You have a group that is totally prehensile-tailed and arboreal, that are all very similar to each other and very different from everything else. That's the very definition of a genus. A group of animals that is more closely related to each other than they are to everything else. You tell me the tree monitor clade is not a separate genus? You're crazy. You have a venomous monitor clade that has two living members and one extinct. The extinct Megalania, Komodo dragons, and crocodile monitors are all literally venomous. But even being venomous, nope, same genus. Same genus. Because the dudes who write the papers, that's their opinion. And they say, well, they're all in different subgenuses. It's like, a subgenus is a bullshit term that almost nobody uses. These are different genuses. This is insane. You obviously have a savanna monitor group. You've got a freaking water monitor group. You got a big-ass mangrove monitor group that's a genus. You've got a sand monitor group that's its own genus. You got a tree monitor group that's its own genus. You got that venomous group that's its own genus. You probably have 8 or 10 genera of monitors. And the fact that they're all in one lump together is so patently absurd, it is almost insulting to my intelligence. And anybody who's it's absolutely ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. That's a standard that is not applied to literally anything else on Earth. But nope, because a small group of guys write all the monitor stuff, that's what's up. And nobody challenges it. And so I guess it's my soapbox to piss on monitor taxonomy on every podcast I'm on. It's just ridiculous. One genus. Are you out of your freaking mind? It's like saying, we're going to put all the primates in one genus. You don't do that. That's insane. That's what you'd be doing. And the monitors,
I didn't realize that
monitors are older than primates and more diverse than primates. They predate primates. They're ancient. They've been around forever. But nope, never wandered off so far as to get your own genus. Any of them, really. It's freaking stupid.
Yeah, that's nuts. I didn't realize that was a thing in terms of the same kind of group of guys really kind of controlling all that. I didn't realize that was the case.
There's a group of guys that write all the Australian Python papers. There's a group of guys that write all the monitor papers. There's a bunch of that stuff. And those people's opinions tend to hold more sway than they maybe should. So that's the thing with science. Nobody's opinion is sacrosanct. Nobody's opinion or paper is ever unimpeachable. That's not how science works. You write a paper and you do your absolute damnedest to make sure you got the best possible conclusion, and you dot your I's and you cross your T's and you put it out there, and then everybody else is supposed to try to destroy your paper. That's the whole point. And if they fail to falsify your paper, you're probably onto something. I've written a handful of books, working on another one right now, and that, I changed fundamental structural elements from the first carbon book to the second book. Why? Was I wrong before? Well, no, but yes, in the sense that the taxonomic arrangement and everything put out there represented the best possible interpretation of the data that all the data you had available at that time in 2011. But then when you fast forward a decade more and you've got a lot more molecular evidence, you got a lot more that stuff, there's a lot more data to draw on, and you can't just hold on to your previous opinion because you said it before. You have to, it's like, this is what we think based on all the evidence we have, but it always has to be subject to change if you get more evidence. You can't just have a sacred cow. You have to, it's like, well, now we know even more, and it's not quite what we thought before. And you know what? If somebody writes another carpet book in 10 years, me or somebody else, they'll probably change something else. If we learn more, it needs to be changed further. The science is it should never claim to be the be all end all final word on anything. It's at best, it is a reflection of the best conclusion you can draw at that time with all the evidence that you have available. That's all it is. It's like, it's a synthesis of all the evidence at that moment, but you gain more, you learn more as you go. And if you learn from that, you might change that, and then you change it. It has to, otherwise it just becomes dogma.
Yeah. 100%. How long did it take you to write the second book?
4 years.
4 years.
Well, the second book is not really a second edition of the first book. It took a few years to write the first book. I didn't want to do, Justin, my co-author, we did not want to do the normal second edition, whereas most second editions are, you put a new cover on it, you throw a few more pictures in it, you add a bonus chapter on some other thing, and you send mostly the same book back out. It's like with a maybe a little bit of expanded content. We just wrote a new book. There isn't a single paragraph in that book that is untouched from the first edition. And we added another 300 pages. Changed every single picture, all of them. Like every picture there's a single picture. Actually, there might be one or two of wild inland carpets, which are hard to get pictures of. But for the most part, every picture in the book is different. And it was like 350 pages to like 650 pages, the second edition. So basically rewrote the whole thing and made it 600 something pages long and changed all the pictures, and yeah. But if you ever look at it, you'll see why it took so long. It's not light reading. It's all the basic stuff that people would want as a hobbyist you could get from that, but there's a lot more science in it. It's pretty hardcore. Like, I didn't want to write, I look at that book in particular as kind of my legacy in the hobby, because I'll be worm food at some point, but that book will still be around. And I kind of wanted to write a book that was so big and so over the top that no one would want to write a book again. It's like, because at this point, if anybody else wants to write a book on carpet pythons, they'll be compared to this 650-page giant book. I wouldn't want to follow that. Like, oh man, it's huge. So I wanted to like the kind of the walk-off home run. It's like, I'm done. Microphone drop. 650 pages.
Yeah. So I own the second book. I don't have the first book, and I definitely haven't sat down and read it from cover to cover, like in
nobody has
order. You just go to like the chapters and you just like look at one chapter at a time. That's how I do it. Like I don't
think anybody is ever. It's a reference book. I don't think anybody just start on page 1 and read it all the way through. It's usually like, what do I want to learn about now at this moment? What do I? Exactly. You look up. It's almost like an encyclopedia where you're looking for the thing. I think that's how most people. I mean, you'll thumb through and look at a lot of pictures, but it's like, oh, how do I breed this? How do I? You look for the information you want to seek at that time.
100%.
Not really linear. That would take a while to get through it.
You said you're working on a third book. Can you talk about that
now? I guess, but yeah, I probably. Writing wise, I don't know what's going on. We're actively working on an Aspideides book, blackheads and womas and such.
Mm-hmm.
That book is pretty far along at this point, but there's 4 authors, which is a bit different for me. So I'm not a major, I'm definitely pulling my weight, but it's not just me. So my contribution to a book that's probably a 300-page book or so-ish that is with 4 people, it's not, the writing process is a bit different, and I don't have to write as much, obviously. And I'm not the lead author on that. My friend Lucas Lee is taking the lead man position on it, and he's done a pretty bang-up job. Driving the bus and everything. So,
is it part of like the complete series? Is it going to be one of those?
That was the plan initially. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, sometimes plans change, but that was the initial plan. Yes, but I'm not sure where we stand with that now. Print media is kind of difficult at times. So I don't know, but more than likely. But we got.
Talk about that a little bit in terms of the challenges with print media.
People, I think the biggest problem is a cultural problem, in that you might have noticed that people's attention spans seem to keep evaporating now. And if you can't fit it on a bumper sticker, people don't digest it. Like, there's a little like, that we have now reduced the phrase "too long, didn't read" is now so commonly used that we just have a little acronym for that. It's like, and then everybody knows what that means. Like, oh, you wrote a paragraph. I'm too lazy to even read a paragraph. Too long, didn't read. That is a thing in our culture now. It just shows the rank laziness of people. And so I think people's attention span for reading what might be difficult subject matter it appeals to a certain group of people, but not a mass audience necessarily. There's chapters in that book that I'm very proud of. And I realize that, like, the evolutionary history chapter is something I'm particularly proud of. I put an absolute massive amount of work into that both times. And Justin really stepped up and added some substantial information about in the second edition as well. But that's something that doesn't appear in any other book. And that's the only place anyone would ever find that information. But it's probably the least read chapter in the whole book, because I think a lot of people, you try to like word things and explain things that are kind of complicated concepts in ways that people who aren't familiar with that stuff can get their brain around it and understand it. But there's definitely bits in there. You might have to read a paragraph twice for it to really sink in. But I know that most people can understand it. But I just think but I'm not delusional. I know a lot of people just like looking at the pictures. That's a thing. But I wanted that information to exist somewhere. And so if you want to learn more, it's there. If you just want to look at the pictures and learn how to breed snakes, it's there. If you want to figure out all the morph stuff, it's all there. Everything is there. Whether you take from it what you want, I guess, and that will be different for different people.
You've been doing this for like 40 plus years, and so obviously you learned a lot of lessons. You've touched on some of this like throughout this conversation, but if you had to like come up with like a handful of like takeaways for people, maybe they're new, maybe they're kind of like I don't know, like been in it a few years or something like that, like what are some like lessons that have really been important for you or to you throughout your career?
I mean, I recognize some of these things are more difficult for some people than for others, but for me personally, my interest, initially you're drawn to look at these cool snakes, and like getting snakes to screw in plastic boxes is awesome. Look at these babies, and that's pretty cool. You know what? It's still cool after all these years. Still cool when eggs hatch every time. I'm stoked. Doesn't matter what it is. Like,
every time.
You're kind of getting, oh, sweet. Especially with something you haven't bred. Like last year, I was over the moon when those rock pythons tipped. They're just like 4 good eggs. Like, oh, what the rock pythons? I was all excited, like I'd never bred anything before. But what has kept me focused and interested as time has gone on is going deeper than just keeping a pretty snake in a box. That is usually what draws people in, but there's so many other levels to this hobby on the science side, and there's so many other things to be fascinated with beyond morphs and breeding and stuff they're really deeper, interesting mysteries. And there's so much of that stuff on that level just past keeping that I would, I would hope people are curious and want to learn about that other stuff. Like why are these? Well, my favorite group of snakes is carpet pythons. That's what everybody knows me for, even though I breed all this other stuff too. But that's a diverse group of snakes that covers a whole continent and an extra liminal population in New Guinea. And, you start thinking like, okay, I have all these things now, and that's cool. And then you breed all these things. And then you start thinking like, why are these things different? They are different. Why are they different? When did they become different? How did they become different? What were the mechanism? What drove these things to be different in different regions? What drove them? What caused them to speciate into different species? What caused their separation that allowed allopatric speciation to even occur in like inland carpets and this kind of stuff? That stuff is what keeps me interested and engaged now, is more the science side of it. And I think if it was just keeping pretty snakes in boxes, I would have lost interest after this long. It's the other side of it now that keeps me interested. And I think I would encourage people to foster that and like indulge that and like think about that stuff. It's really fascinating because life, whether you're talking about snakes or people or plants or whatever it is, the drivers that drive these snakes to become different in different regions are driving everything to be different in different regions. And you start figuring out, like, why is this different? You'll see speciation patterns that are the same for everything. Like, if you look at a map of New Guinea and you look at a range map of all the crocodile skink species, it's exactly the same range map as the chondro species, which is exactly the same range map as the crown pigeons, which is also exactly the same map as the cassowaries, which there's multiple species of cassowaries in New Guinea. And why is it? It's because the same geographic barriers to gene flow have affected all these things, and everything in this area has evolved to be its own species. Why? And that understanding, like, the animals we keep in boxes we're kind of looking at them with no context. They evolved in a certain context, a certain place. And when you just look at them outside of that native context, you're just seeing one part in a very large machine that they're a part of. And look at the rest of that stuff. That's some really interesting stuff. And another thing that dovetails with that, I would encourage people that has kept me interested in it and keeps me going, is get your ass off your couch and go out and go to these places and find this stuff. If you think like looking at a ball python is cool in your house, imagine looking at one in the wild in West Africa. That would be way more awesome.
Yeah.
Go find a python in the wild. It is the biggest thrill you will ever have. It's the greatest thing. Get out in nature and see some stuff and have a freaking adventure. Oh, I think one of the biggest tragedies I look around people is there's so many people that are going to live their whole lives and then their life will be over and they will never have had any adventure. They'll never have done that awesome thing, that awesome trip, and done the thing, you know? And reptiles, even if you just start small, like wherever you're at, you must be down southeast somewhere if you're by Tillis, right?
Yeah, Florida.
And you got awesome herps everywhere. You can go, well, hell, you can go find a Burmese python. Like, get out. Get out of your house and go cruise around and find some of this. It's awesome. If you can get overseas and go find the species that you're so into, like in the wild. Like, I found a few carpet pythons and I found a fair number of pythons and many trips to Australia and other places and whatnot. And it is like, your appreciation for the stuff you have at home just gets deeper when you've actually. It's one thing to like think about where this python comes from, but when you go to like, you know, Central Australia looking for Bredl's pythons and you can feel that heat and you can feel that, it's like, that's like, I don't know. And you're in that place. It's like, you have a different respect for those animals because you get it on another level. And I think, you know, everybody should make that pilgrimage to wherever that thing is. Like in these places, it's totally doable. I'm going to leave on a trip here on next week. Like,
oh, where are you going?
New Guinea.
Okay.
So yeah, no, it's you gotta get out and go do the things and have those adventures and find this stuff in the wild if you can. It's the greatest thing you'll ever do. Like, how sad would it be to get to the end of your life and realize you never had any good stories? Like, you never like go to the crazy place, eat the crazy weird food, have the adventure, take a few chances. Your life will be immeasurably better for it.
I meant to ask this earlier, but when you said you were going to be out of town, that reminded me. So in terms of like your operations, like I'm assuming you have like a team and it's not just you taking.
No, it's just me.
It's just you?
Yeah, it's just me. That's why my collection cannot get any bigger. It is as big as I can possibly do by myself.
That's a lot.
Any bigger, and I would have to have an employee or I'd have to have employees, and I don't want that. If you buy a snake from me, you're buying a snake from me. If you buy a snake, not to throw shade at like somebody like Mike Wilbanks, if you buy a snake from Mike Wilbanks, you are probably buying a snake that he has never even fucking seen. Because somebody's paying, put those snakes together, somebody's paying, hatched and set those babies up, and somebody's paying, shipped it to you, and answered your email. He's probably unaware of that animal ever even existed, now he never even laid eyes on it. You're not buying it from him. If you buy a snake from me, you are buying a snake from me that I hatched, from snakes that I produced, whose parents I produced, whose grandparents I probably also produced. And I know every single thing there is about that snake. I don't want to farm that out. I don't want to put my reputation in the hands of somebody else. It's like, you know, I don't want to do that. I have tried to, on a couple occasions, pay somebody to clean rodents, and even that never works out. They always flake out on you or something. It's like, so I even do my own rodents. Like it's 100%, but that puts kind of a hard limit. I have to try to not produce more than about if I go over about 350 babies in a year, it gets really tough because the stuff I breed, if you had 350 ball pythons and you tried to feed them all on the first try, 250 would eat on the first try. Like they're just, because they're mammal eaters and they know what mice are. But with this kind of stuff, they don't know what mice are because mice aren't native to Australia. They're looking for some Australian gecko or skink that they're never going to get. So getting them feeding is not always difficult. It's not, most of the time it's not too bad, but it's not an automatic thing. So you have a lot of time in that. And I also breed a lot of the Antaresia genus that are lizard eaters. So I hatched 78 of them this year. And that's a lot of lizard eaters.
Yeah.
Lot. I mean, you get them eating pinkies, and I've never fed one a lizard my entire life, but you don't just, you know, they're one of those things like, hey, I got 10 children's pythons, and you throw pinkies in there, and 3 out of 10 ate it, and 7 didn't. And then over the next 2 months, you get the other ones going. But there's always the one in the clutch you have to assist feed for 6 months because it never gets, you know, it's that kind of a thing. So I have to limit my numbers because if I go much past the 350 mark, then I can't do the animals justice. I can't give them the attention they need. And then I start slacking off. And then if I start slacking off, animals suffer. So I got to kind of cap it off there.
Yeah, that makes sense. How long are you going to be out of the country?
A couple weeks. I can't be gone as long.
You said a couple weeks?
Yeah.
So even when you gone like for a couple of weeks, you don't have anybody like helping you out? Because I know I'm going for a couple of days. Yeah. Like I feel like it's a shit show when I get back.
No, it will be. No, it will be. Like it will absolutely will be. But snakes are pretty resilient in that regard. Mostly, as long as they just don't run out of water, you're probably all right. Mostly, it's like. But I do things like when I go out of town periodically. Like if I go on a trip or something, I will stop feeding them about 10 days before I leave, so that they shit before I leave. So that last cleaning before I go, they're not likely to even crap while I'm gone because I didn't feed them.
Yeah.
Don't run them out of water, you know. And it's not, and all my snake rooms and building, it's all kind of programmed on autopilot. The temperatures are all going to take care of themselves. Everything's thermostatically controlled. There's nothing that really, you know, other than routine maintenance, but if they're not crapping, they're not. And I'm just coming out of brumation now. So a lot of these snakes haven't eaten in months. So nobody's crapping. It's like you have to kind of time it right.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Tropical places, you got to, you know, the timing of when to go. Turns out if you have enough snakes, it's never a good time to go out of town. It's just like there's always something going on. It's either you have to pair them to breed them, or are you waiting for eggs, or the eggs are hatching, or you got to get these things feeding. It's like there's never a point where nothing's going on. There's always something, but you can't also let that hold you back and never go do anything. What kind of life is that? You know,
right.
I'm 52 years old. I'll be 53 this year, so. I don't got that many years left, man. I'm on the backside of things. I better get busy living, right? Like, and I have made traveling and adventuring around a priority my whole life. I've been to a lot of places, a lot of countries, seen a lot of crazy stuff, done a lot of awesome things, and that's a life well lived, in my opinion. You know, I suppose that's different for everybody, but I think everybody should figure out what their passion in life is and really just go for it. I think people get bogged down into like, oh, I don't know how I could never go do that because I couldn't afford it. I can't take the time off of work or whatever. There's always like this list of reasons why you can't do the thing. And what has worked for me my whole life is like, well, if you have an insurmountable problem that has multiple parts, if you look at that problem as a whole, you're never even going to get started on it. It's too much. I can't do it. I give up. If you break those, usually when there's a bunch of problems, it's like a series of smaller problems that compound to make a big problem.
Right.
If you break that big problem apart into its component pieces, you can solve those one at a time. How can I get the time away from work or whatever? Figure that out. When you got that, then figure out where am I going to get the money from? It's like, and then you figure out all the other, and eventually you solve all the individual constituent parts and you go do the thing or whatever the thing is, you know, whatever that means to the individual that's important to them. But I don't know. Don't be shackled by that. Figure it out. It's worth it. You only live once and you don't even know how long you're going to be here. And nobody does. And what do you want to do with that time? I mean, it's like, I want to go balls out the whole time. Like, I want to do as much as pack as much awesome into my life as I possibly can. And everybody should. We delude ourselves and we think we're going to live forever and we're not. It's amazing to me, like, how much time people waste because they think they're immortal or something. It's like we all know we're going to die in the abstract, but not in the like the literal sense. It's like the clock is ticking every damn day. If not now, when? What are you doing? Like, get out there. If it's important, do it while you can. Make it happen. Hustle. Get it done, And we all have like, there's always more desire than there is resources, isn't there? We always want everything, but resources kind of limit things. And it's like, and the older I get, the more I've probably always felt this way. But the older I get, I just realize that like, if you have limited resources, mostly comes down to two things. What do you do with those resources? You can acquire stuff or you can have experiences. And at the end of your life, you're going to look back and you are not going to like lament the fucking jet ski you didn't buy. You're going to resent the trip. You're going to resent the trip and the adventure you didn't have. Experience trumps possessions. Spend your life having experiences and prioritize that over material possessions that don't really matter in the long run anyway. Well, that got weirdly philosophical for her podcast.
No, that's great advice, bro. That's great advice. In fact, bro, I think we're gonna wrap it up there because I know you got to run somewhere, and so I don't feel like we can get to any better advice than what you just gave. So we'll wrap it up there.
Sure.
I appreciate you coming on, man. It's been a blast. Definitely want to touch base and maybe get you on show again in the future at some point.
Absolutely.
Have a great time in New Guinea, man, and I definitely appreciate you stopping by. I'm gonna throw you backstage for a minute, do a little quick outro, and then we'll wrap up the show.
Okay.
Yo, that was super dope, man. I love the science, I love the philosophical aspects, like all that. That was super dope. So definitely glad we got a chance to tap in with Nick. This was a really great discussion, man. Definitely very appreciative of it. Real quick, before we get out of here tonight, just a few promo reminders. Make sure you checking us out everywhere you can find us. You can find us on Morph Market. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and all major podcast platforms. And that's not only Clutch Conversations, but that's each show in the Herp Collectors Network catalog. You can find us there. And definitely check out the website, check out the blog, all that good stuff. Also, make sure you're supporting both USARP, Florida. The link for both organizations is in the description of the video. And if you're not in the Double Clutch Patreon, make sure you join the Double Clutch Patreon. We have a blast in there, man. We kicking it. We all learning. We learning from each other. It's not just me and Matt handing out knowledge and all that good stuff, man. We learning from each other. I'm a firm believer that you can learn from anybody. So real good time, man. It's a whole vibe. And then also, speaking of a whole vibe, make sure you check out all the shows that we got. We got 7 shows total. We on 6 days a week. This one right here, Conjure Corner, Mondays at 9. That's going to be super dope. And then definitely check out all the other shows. You can see them listed there. Definitely appreciate y'all tapping in with us. But that's going to do it for tonight for Clutch Conversations. I'm Mike. That was Nick Mutton. And the lovely lady behind the scenes is the car. Thank y'all for coming out. Be blessed. Peace.